Good morning. I'm going to talk today more about our sense of self, our view of ourself. So this is Who Do You Think You Are? Part 3. So in part 1 I talked about our identification or our over-identification with external objects and possessions, places we live and so on. And then in part 2 I spoke about it in terms more of our immediate sensations, our direct experience. I asked the question, are we our body? Are we our thoughts? Are we our feelings or emotions? And today I'm going to come at it from a different angle again. And I'm going to start with a quote which I read in Sharon Salzberg's excellent book on loving kindness. And in there she quotes, I can't remember who the quote is from, it wasn't a name that I knew. But anyway, it goes like this. Wisdom tells me I am nothing. Love tells me I am everything. My life oscillates between the two. I'll just say that again. Wisdom tells me I am nothing. Love tells me I am everything. My life oscillates between the two. So, do we believe the wisdom statement and therefore conclude that we are nothing? Or do we believe the love aspect and conclude that we are everything? What does it mean to be nothing or to be everything? Well, the wisdom aspect, in a way, I've already talked about in the previous 2 parts. If we look at our direct experience, we conclude that we aren't our thoughts, we aren't our body, not in any real lasting sense, nor are we our feelings or emotions, because they don't last either. So there's nothing enduring to be found in those things. And we're also not our possessions. Those possessions and the place we live, they're part of our lives, but they're not part of any kind of lasting or enduring self. So those are wisdom aspects of teaching about self. And so we could conclude from all of that we are therefore nothing. But that doesn't mean annihilation or oblivion, or that we are just like a black hole or a void or something like that. So Buddhism doesn't deny existence in the sense of experience. Buddhism talks about awareness of experience. So all of the time we are aware of experience. But at the same time, we don't have an inherent, built-in, lasting self which is our existence. So the awareness that we experience is awareness of the flow of continually changing experiences. So it's like it's a bit like a river going through a changing landscape. There isn't really any one part of the river that you can point to and say, this is the river, because the river is continually moving. It's not fixed. And it moves through a continually changing landscape. It might be rural, it might be urban, it changes all the time. It might be quiet, it might be noisy. And this is the same for us. We are just like that river, inasmuch as there's no part of our direct experience that we can point to and say, this is myself. At last I found myself. We can't do that because there's nothing there to grasp, just like the drops of water in a river. And our experience changes all the time. The landscape that we flow through continually changes. Some of it, of course, is familiar. We experience certain landscapes pretty much all of the time, like the room we live in. But even that, even our experience of being in that room, is not the same. So, in a sense, wisdom tells us that we are nothing, that we are emptiness, that we are shunya, empty. But empty means just empty of inherent self-nature. It doesn't mean empty in the sense of annihilation or voidness. So let's move on to the other half of that quote that I mentioned at the beginning, which is, love tells me I am everything. When we do metta-bhavana practice, we begin with awareness of ourself and we generate metta towards ourself, even though that self is not fixed or enduring. We encourage metta towards our ever-changing experience. And then we gradually include other beings in our metta practice. And in the final stage, as you know, we include all beings in our awareness. We include all beings in our loving kindness. So you could say we've moved from something very small to something very large. We've expanded our awareness greatly. We've come from just being aware of our small self, and we've gradually opened up so that we become, well, in a sense, as big as all beings would be if you put them all together. So the way we arrive at that is by connecting, isn't it? We connect with ourselves, we connect with a friend, a neutral person, a difficult person, and we connect with all beings. And the deeper that connection is, the stronger that connection is with all beings, then the more we get less of a sense of a fixed self-identity and more a sense of connection, more a sense that we are everything rather than nothing. And there are many practices in Buddhism which encourage this connection. For example, Bodhicitta practice, some of you will have done, where we also connect with all beings, but this time through the suffering of all beings and the awareness that in the same way that I myself do not want to suffer, in the very same way all other beings do not want to suffer either. So we connect with other beings through that desire not to suffer, but also through the deep connection that we make with the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas. So as well as connecting with all living beings as a way of getting a sense that we are everything rather than nothing, we also connect with Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, which also greatly expands our consciousness. And because these beings, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, because they are unfailingly positive, full of metta, full of loving kindness, they're fearless and compassionate, full of energy. Because of this, we can always rely on them to help us out. So it's through our connection with the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas that we are able to connect with the suffering of all living beings. Otherwise it would be too much. So how do we connect with the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas? Well, we just have to become familiar with them. And we can do that through reading about them, through talking about them with other people, through looking at their images, and through meditating on them, through visualizing them. So there are many ways in which we can become connected with the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and with beings in the world. We can connect particularly with beings in the world through that sense of suffering and not wanting to suffer. Buddhism tells us that all phenomena are interconnected, that every being or every phenomenon reflects every other being or every other phenomenon in itself. If we look into our experience deeply enough, we can see this. We can see that, or I can see that what I might call my suffering or my joy is not really different to the suffering or joy of other beings. And with that awareness, we can awaken to a much larger connection. We can become much bigger than who we normally are. We can become less held, less caged in our own sense of self. The other part of that quote that I started out with today says that my life oscillates between the two. So sometimes we experience what we might call nothing, or we feel that wisdom is leading us in that direction of emptiness. But then we have times when we balance that by an awareness of our connection with all beings and with all phenomena, and then we shift the other way to more an experience that we are in fact everything. So is that the way that we need to go? Do we need to experience ourselves as everything rather than nothing? Well, in a way, those two are extremes, aren't they? Nothing or everything. All or nothing. But really, those are just words to talk about our experience. So I think probably we experience whatever we experience, whether it's a sense of nothingness or insignificance or smallness or emptiness in the more positive sense of the word, openness, or we perceive more a sense of connection, more a sense of vastness, or the enormity of the universe and our connection with it. And we continually change perhaps between these two extremes. But maybe there's some middle ground, some way of being which doesn't need to be so extreme. So I guess I'm pointing towards equanimity. So equanimity is one of the Brahma Viharas. And that's more a state of balance, where we're aware of the wisdom aspect and we're aware of the love or compassion aspect. But still we don't identify ourselves as nothing or as everything particularly. We just experience the flow of events, and we have the knowledge that wisdom gives us, and we have the compassion or love aspect as well. I'll leave it there for today. Thanks for listening.